So, sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is learning a little more about the RSO, the Rapid Sustainment Office. So, sir, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your career background and where you are at now.
Certainly, and again, I'll thank you for the opportunity to speak here today and let everybody kind of know about what the RSO and what our mission is, what we do. I'm John Hedke. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Director of Engineering for the Air Force's Rapid Sustainment Office. We are a directorate, LCMC RO, within the Lifecycle Management Center. My role here is essentially I provide overarching guidance and direction to all of the activities that are going on from a technical perspective, making sure that we're selecting mature technologies and that those technologies will have some fruit to bear once we get to the end of our process. And fruit to bear meaning that they're going to have an impact into the sustainment world of the Air Force. My background, I've been in the Air Force since 2006. I've had numerous assignments across Lifecycle Management Center, multitude of different program offices. I've worked rotary wing aircraft, fighters. I've worked unmanned aerial systems. And I spent a lot of time in the engineering office and the home office. And probably for about the last 7 to 8 years, I've been focused heavily on sustainment technology. I've been in the RSO itself since 2019. So not long after the RSO was created, I was moved into that organization to continue focusing on sustainment technologies.
Okay, all right. So you said that the RSO is there to kind of transform the acquisition and sustainment enterprise. Give us a little understanding of what does that mean?
So what we mean by transform is, most of what is used today in sustainment across the Air Force are things that we acquired back when the system was first delivered. And so what we are seeking to do is to modernize the ways that we sustain a weapon system. So when you think about a platform like, for example, B-52 or KC-135, or honestly, even C-17, many of the sustainment solutions that were delivered when that platform was first acquired. And so it's how do we modernize the way we sustain our platforms? And broadly, when I say enterprise, what I mean is, there is a program office that focuses on, for example, F-15. There is a program office in fighters and advanced aircraft, and they focus on the life cycle of the F-15 weapon system. So if there's a problem that's unique to the F-15 weapon system, that's really in their job jar to solve. However, I think there's a recognition, that's why the RXO exists, is many of the problems that the F-15 has are also problems that the F-16 has, that the A-10 has, that the C-5 has, that the C-130, and I could go on and on and on. Those are enterprise problems. And so it's been difficult over time throughout history, for weapon systems that have a problem that is an enterprise problem to solve that for themselves. And so that's where the RSO comes into the picture. We look at things that affect the enterprise, and we are solving those problems. So it may help 1 or 2 weapon systems, or it may help 10 weapon systems, but we're focused on things that affect multiple platforms and that are focused on the sustainment of those platforms.
And now it's important that you keep mentioning sustainment, because a lot of people look at the acquisition cost of platforms when they come on. Well, that aircraft costs $100 million or whatever the cost of it was. But the true cost that the Air Force actually spends is more in the sustainment line, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So there are numerous studies and analyses that you can point to, and there are various, those studies show numbers, and I'll kind of summarize. Some show like 70% of the total life cycle cost of a weapon system is in sustainment. Some show the numbers as high as 80. I mentioned platforms like KC-135 and B-2. They've been in service for more than half a century. I suspect their numbers will even be much higher. Maybe 85, 90%, or in excess of 90% of the total cost of that platform has been in sustainment.
Yeah. So the RSO, how do you find these new technologies? What's the pathway?
So I would say there isn't a a specific one-size-fits-all answer to that. I would say they kind of broadly fit into two categories. One way, which may not seem so obvious to people in the government, is outside industry. So there are a lot of commercial aviation operators out there. They're sustaining their aircraft. Obviously, they have different missions than we do. Some actually have fairly similar missions. Think of FedEx and UPS. They're moving cargo. We have elements within our forces that move cargo. So obviously they don't fly into a high threat environment like we may, but again, there are definitely some similarities. So one thing we do is we look at commercial industry, and some of that may be from aviation, and some of that may not be from aviation. So when we look at metal fabrication, we look at printing of making components, hydraulic cylinders. Well, there's hydraulic cylinders on bulldozers. There's hydraulic cylinders on airplanes. So we look across industry. We look for what things that they're investing in. That is one broad source. The other source is the department itself. So I mentioned earlier about we focus on the enterprise, and there are some cases where individual programs have decided, hey, this is such an issue for us. We're going to solve it. And they may not even be aware that it's an enterprise problem, but it's really a problem for them. And so they will solve that problem. And we look for both within the Air Force as well as across the Department of Defense. What things are we developing that are being put in one application that could have a much broader use? And so those are, I would say, are the two big ways in which we find technologies. We have a small team within our organization that we use for technology scouting. And that team is looking across industry as well as the department for what innovations are happening in the sustainment area and how can we harvest those and apply those on a larger scale.
And that's oftentimes when you hear the word scale. So could you just explain, when you say we want to scale this across the enterprise, what does that mean?
So scale, again, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record here, but so I'll go back to the example of an individual weapon system. I used F-15 earlier, right? So let's say F-15 is having a problem where they've ran out of a source of supply for a nickel plated fastener, as an example. The EPA has banned nickel plating, which I don't believe is the case, but let's just say for discussion that happened. Just so happens that lots of aircraft in the Air Force use nickel-plated fasteners. So F-15, hey, we have to solve this. We have a critical need. They find a substitute. They find a new material. It's some nano coating on high-strength steel fasteners, and it meets their application. So what does scale mean? It means instead of just solving that problem for F-15, it means taking that same solution and allowing every user of that particular application in the Air Force to benefit from that solution. So scaling it would be, hey, this is an acceptable substitute for F-15. They've proven it, but it's also acceptable for F-16, for F-22, for F-35, and for B-1 and B-52, and to use it on as many platforms as possible. So, maybe to borrow a poor man's analogy, we seek to not just, kill two birds with one stone. It's to kill as many birds as we possibly can with a single stone. That's really what scaling is.
Yeah. And the long-term benefits of that, if you buy 50 fasteners for just the F-15, but instead you buy 5 million for all of the aircraft, that's going to be even that much cheaper.
Yes, correct. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's another way to frame problems. So there could be things that are under the waterline. Maybe that's bad to use for to an Air Force audience, but there are things that are under the waterline in terms of an individual weapon system. Yeah, this is a problem for us in the F-15 SPO, but it's number 40 on our list right now. It doesn't raise to a level of attention yet for us. But if that problem is number 40 on their list, and it's number 35 on someone else's list, and it's number 20 on a third organization's list, and so on and so forth, it could actually be the number 2 problem in the Air Force. And so when we talk about enterprise and scale, that's another thing the RSO looks at, is we're looking to deliver solutions that may not be the number 1 issue for one weapon system or even 10 weapon systems, but it's a high priority for the Air Force overall from an enterprise perspective.
And the Air Force, sometimes because of the way we're structured, we tend to be focused on our particular platform, where the RSO is more in a position to look across a multitude of platforms.
Yes, yeah, we do that exactly. So we engage with all of the lead MAGCOMs. We work with Headquarters Air Force. We collect all of their inputs. And by no means am I saying that's easy. That takes, constant effort on our part to stay engaged with them and understand what their needs are, and as well as the sustainment center. So the things we work on are not just confined to field level maintenance. It's sustainment broadly. So understanding the entire sustainment enterprise, what all the diverse needs are, and then kind of distilling that down to here are the priorities that we go after. I don't want to simplify how difficult that is. It's definitely difficult. And I'm not here today saying that we have the perfect answer. It's kind of an ongoing and evolving battle. Are we working on things that are high priority for the Air Force? Yes, absolutely. Am I confident that we have captured every single thing and we know from 1 to N on our list, this is the number 3 item and it's definitely not number 4 and number 5 shouldn't be number 3? No, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I'm highly confident that, our list of say top 20, top 30 things, that I think if most people were to see that, there would be consensus.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the recent technology wins that have happened for the RSO.
So recent, a few things that I would highlight, one of our big efforts is advanced manufacturing. In the advanced manufacturing area, we've been working to qualify and release materials for use across the enterprise. So we've developed a new process in working with and supporting the EM Directorate here in the Lifecycle Management Center, and really in consultation with Air Force Material Command headquarters as well. And so we pushed out a new process. It's called the Technology Assessment Process. We've been prototyping and running through the first couple applications. And we just, about a week or so ago, kind of publicized the most recent approval from that process. So it's the second material for additive. It's a polymer material. Antero is the trade name of it. But we've qualified it for certain uses. And we've published a safe use determination circular, which defines what the bounds of that safe use is. It gives recommendations to the engineering community about here's what we know about the material, here's what we don't know, here's where it should be used. Here are the applications. If we were to draw like a box, here's the box you can operate in. It doesn't mean you can't operate outside that box. It just means we don't know how it operates outside of that box. So you may have some homework to do on your end if you want to use it. So that's one win on the additive manufacturing side. On the another area we have is an innovation and modernization for scale. That's another organization. So we're trying to find new unique solutions, and an effort we've been working on is solar powered integrated structures. So think of tents, but with solar panels woven into the fabric. That's basically what we're talking about here. And we have over the past year and a half been participating in a number of operational exercises. In the recent last quarter of last year, we've kind of rounded that out, completed the last exercise. We've had a tremendous amount of feedback from their operational community, a lot of pull. People ask, solar powered tent, what does that mean? It means in an environment where you're forward deploying into an austere location, you don't need to take as many generators. It means you don't have to take as much fuel with you. You can generate your own power. Can you fully operate on solar? No. But it's definitely augmenting. So huge potential there in terms of austere operating locations. What's the win? We've completed our assessment. We're saying this technology is ready for scale. And what we're doing with it is we're entering it. We're going to stock list the item. So we're going through that process right now with DLA. And what that means is once it's stock listed, that any unit in the Air Force now has a way to buy it. So as long as they have funds and they have a purchasing department, they can go out onto the DLA stock listed item and request that and use it for their needs. So again, that's enabling the enterprise to use the technology that we've proven is beneficial. And then the third thing I would point to on the condition-based maintenance side, that's a big area for us as well. The CVM Plus program office, they have a tool that's for the enterprise for the application of CVM Plus, and we fielded our first applications of sensor-based algorithms in that tool. So major release happened earlier this month in January, pushed out that capability to the field, and we fielded our first handful of sensor-based algorithms on B1. That's just the tip of the iceberg for Panda and for sensor-based algorithms. The team is working on a plan right now to scale this across the Air Force to spread that capability to all the other platforms that we're engaged with currently.
Okay. And for that now, that allows you to kind of predict when repairs are needed on the aircraft. Is that correct? And kind of save maintenance downtime?
Yes. So that's overall the intent of Condition-Based Maintenance Plus, is to identify an evidence of need, identify when maintenance is needed. Historically in the Air Force, the evidence of need is, hey, that thing is broken. Either the airplane, the for lack of a better term, the check engine light, like in your car, hey, the light comes on and says there's something wrong, or the aircrew reports that there's something anomalous with the aircraft. So that's what I would describe as flight of failure. That's historically how we operate. So we're very, very reactive. The evidence of need we're looking for from the Condition-Based Maintenance Plus program is, hey, this thing is degraded. This sensor, or this component, or this part of the airplane is not operating normally. It's still operating. You're still able to perform your mission, but we're putting you on notice that you should plan for this thing. You should plan for this maintenance and choose when to do it so that it disrupts your operations to the minimum amount possible. That in essence is what CVM Plus is all about. So it's not telling someone you have to go do maintenance. It's telling them that they need to be prepared. And if they choose not to act, eventually the airplane will choose for them.
Yeah, and so absolutely, you can now effect the repair during a time when your operations allow it, as opposed to waiting until it's broken and then it's sitting there on a ramp, can't fly.
Absolutely. There are other things that can be done with that. Think of a scenario like, hey, I'm at a base and I gotta send a force package, to a forward deployed location. Okay, if I knew the condition of all the airplane on my ramp, it might influence which ones I was going to choose to send. Or it might influence what material I was going to send forward to support those aircraft while they were going to be there. So beyond just actually taking action and removing parts from airplanes, that knowledge about the health of components on your aircraft and how much more health they have and when they might experience a loss of functionality, can be used to do many other things.
So what are some things that you've got rolling down the pipeline?
So we actually got quite a few projects overall in the RSO. In total, we have 58 projects that we're working. Again, dispersed across a large, wide area. So I'll talk about a few. Again, in the CVM, I already kind of mentioned Panda. That's our application, our toolkit for predictive analytics. Much more to come down the pike, as I mentioned already, on sensor-based algorithms. We've just really kind of opened that can. So much more exploration to do there. More things coming in Panda, things like fleet management. So getting after some of those ideas and concepts that I just mentioned about, hey, I want to build a force package. Which aircraft should I pick? What spares should I take with them? So using the knowledge that we're extracting through our analytics toolkit to help support other decisions. Those are things that are on the horizon for Panda. And that's what the CVM Plus team is focused on. For the Additive Manufacturing Program Office, more of what I described earlier, more of these releases talking about how to safely use materials that we're producing. So far, the first two have been focused on polymers, on plastics. We have one that we submitted recently, in fact, just about 2 weeks ago now. It was our first metal material. So what's on the horizon for the AMPO is many more metals. I would say probably about, I think, 6 more metals are we planning to submit over the next 6 to 8 months into that review process. We're anticipating it will probably take several months to complete the review process for each one of them. So, I would say by the end of this calendar year, we should have safe use determinations on a host of different metal materials. They're also focused on, building capacity and capability across the enterprise. So what exactly does that mean across the enterprise and capacity and capability? That means actually buying printers, both metal and polymer printers, and installing those at Air Force locations across the globe, building a network to where we can utilize those new approvals to actually make parts. So those are the things that the AMPO are focused on. That's what I see on the horizon for them. And then for the Ames team, again, they are, I would say their interests are much more diverse. So the RSO has 6 technology focus areas that we're focused on, and Ames, actually 4 of those are the responsibility of Ames. So things like, rapid and austere maintenance. I already talked about that. We have other applications for structures. How do we perform sustainment, again, over in an austere location? We have a paint booth, portable paint booths, portable structures, aircraft maintenance hangars that can be stood up in a matter of hours versus ones today that could take days to a week with minimal support equipment and just a few personnel. So those are things that we're working on. Another project that we're working on is what we call e-drill. It's essentially electronic discharge machining. So today in the sustainment center, I don't have actual numbers, but I feel pretty confident saying we remove thousands of rivets from aircraft structures on a daily basis, probably tens of thousands. Maybe that's an underestimate. And most of that today is done, in fact, if not all, or certainly the overwhelming majority is done with a very, very tried and true method of using a drill. I'm going to drill out the rivet. Well, that's slow. And in cases where we have high strength fasteners, it's not easy to drill through titanium. So electronic discharge machining replaces the drill bit with a small electronic diode, basically. So there's a little, it looks like a gun, for the lack of a better term, that you put on the outer mold line of an aircraft on the outer surface, and you can basically erode away the head of a rivet without drilling. So that's a technology that we are actively involved with. We think that that's going to produce a tremendous amount of benefit, especially in depot operations, but we think eventually it can be used on flight line operations as well. So that's a project that we're pushing hard on right now. Right now, we're engaged with the C-130 and B-1, early discussions about what would it take to qualify for this for use on your platforms. And we're using that as a springboard to think across the enterprise. So when we go to qualify something, we won't just qualify it for 1 or 2 platforms. We will try to qualify for as many as possible. Again, that kill many birds with one stone philosophy. So that's an example. Many other robotic applications. We're looking at automated fastener removal. So taking that e-drill, putting it on the end of a robot. Removing the human from the loop. Stop having them do repetitive things. Automated paint applications, take the human out of the hazardous environment. Again, how to improve worker throughput, reduce injuries, reduce harmful exposure. Those are things that are focuses of our robotics automation team. And then another major effort for us is our Lighthouse project. And we have essentially like an integration application that takes lots of different inputs from various Air Force enterprise information systems, fuses that information together, and provides situational awareness to the maintainer, allows them to execute their job much faster. So right now, if you were to go out and do a day in the life of the maintainer, what you would find is them hopping between a multitude, dozens or more different information systems, looking for the information that they need to execute their job. And our Lighthouse integration technology engine, LIGHT, as we call it, it fuses all that information together into a common interface. And it streamlines the process for maintenance and allows them to focus on what really they should be doing, which is working on aircraft and weapon systems, instead of sitting behind a computer and trying to find the information that they need to actually do that work.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that you dialogue with industry, or you search across industry to see what's coming along. And I know you guys recently had an industry day. How did that go?
It went very well, to be honest. There was, so that was really kind of a first for us. We've had industry days before, but they were usually to award contracts. So it was kind of at the end of a search for things, much like other program offices have done, like a SIBR type thing, something like that. So this was an informational industry day. So it was a very open dialogue with industry, very broad topics that we solicited on. And you asked earlier about how do we find solutions. That was one way for us to find solutions. So we didn't go out and say, I want to know something about XYZ. We almost went out and said, we want to know about the alphabet. And in fact, we didn't say it had to be the English alphabet. So, we were casting as broad a net as we could possibly cast. There was quite a bit of response. I think we got somewhere close to 100 responses. Obviously, we didn't have enough time to have every one of them come in. We definitely reviewed and read every response, and we narrowed it down to, I think, our top dozen. We invited them in, had more ongoing dialogue to better understand what their solutions were, what technologies they were offering. All of this was to support future investments from the RSO perspective. So again, as I mentioned, we talk across the different users, the using commands. We understand what their needs are. We talk to the Sustainment Center. We collect their needs. And so what the industry day is to have a catalog of solutions so that when we get the needs, we can match those together. And so that we definitely came away with a better understanding of the landscape and industry and what does that look like in terms of solutions that are available.
And so what do you think the future looks like for the RSO, say in 3 years' time or so?
3 years from now, what I would say for the RSO is two things I would say. Kind of a strengthening and deepening of things that we are already doing, that we are already scaling. And so those two things would be like, again, condition-based maintenance plus. I see Panda, the toolkit, getting stronger, more capability. I see more people using it, more organic use of that. We have a lot of contractors doing work for the Air Force and providing analysis. I see us moving more towards organic doing that, having more organic personnel do that. Program offices using this on a daily basis. I see, logisticians logging in, seeing this information. I see greater adoption and use across the flight lines and the depots. I see us just kind of going more all in on Panda and a broader use and more functionality and capability in Panda. On the additive manufacturing program office side, again, I see us building out that enterprise across the Air Force, both on our organic industrial base in the depots, as well as out in field locations. I see a proliferation of printing capability. I see more materials. Again, I already outlined some of the things we're talking there. I see, we have a handful of qualified printers. I see that list growing. I see additional printers coming. I see more materials coming. I see us diving into more critical type applications. So instead of a part that, may not have a flight critical function, I see us moving on to things that do have flight critical functions and beginning to delve into that area. On the AIM side, on the advancing innovation, modernization for scale, that third team in the RSO, I see more of what they're doing, which is innovation. I see them, 3 years from now. Frankly, I shouldn't be able to say what they're going to be doing 3 years from now. If they're truly innovative, I don't know what they'll be working on 3 years from now. I know what we're talking about right now and what's in our near future, but if 3 years from now, if we aren't working on something in AIMS that wasn't on our radar today, I would say that we have failed.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So if you're a company that's never worked with the Air Force or with the RSO before, what's the best way for them to get involved or to get in contact with you?
So I'll offer two solutions. One is if there was a contracting officer sitting over my shoulder, they'd probably be patting me on the back here, but sam.gov. So anything official from the RSO in terms of opportunities for them to solicit and be involved with work that the RSO involved, that always is going to go out on sam.gov. That is the way we communicate, just like every other LCMC organization. So clearly stay abreast and keep your finger on the pulse of that. The other way is LinkedIn. So, the RSO is pretty active on LinkedIn. We have other social media platforms that we participate in, but LinkedIn really is our primary focus. I would say, look us up, follow us. Anytime we're talking about things, you'll see what we're interested in. You'll see projects that we're involved in. We give updates on stuff we're working on. So beyond just official solicitations, if I was in industry, I would want to know, like, hey, what are my potential customers interested in? If you want to know what the RSO is interested in and what we're working on, follow us on LinkedIn and interact with us there, engage with us there.
Okay. So, sir, that pretty much brings us to the end of our time. But before we close, is there anything I forgot to ask you about or anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the questions you asked. You're obviously very well versed and kind of prepared for this discussion. I would just say, the RSO, I mentioned earlier about, the constant battle we have and battle in terms of staying abreast of what the needs of the enterprise are. So what I would, the message I would leave for everyone is we're here to support the enterprise. And the only way we can support the enterprise is if the enterprise informs us on what their needs are. We certainly do our best to do our homework there. But again, working with active partners is much, much easier than figuring it all on our own. So I encourage everyone across Lifecycle Management Center and beyond in the Air Force, if you're in the sustainment area and you have a need, reach out to the RSO and we will do our best to support you.
Sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log and helping explain and understand a little bit better about the RSO and your impact you're having on the enterprise.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity.